your last name?
Mastrine. It's spelled wrong. Yeah, from Ellis Island, so it's Mastrine.
Okay. Today, I want to welcome Amy Mastrine. She is an artist, marketing professional, and a contributor to Evie Magazine, where she discusses and shares a lot about her ideas of virtue, truth, and beauty. So today, I want to talk about her art, what inspires her, and her musings and thoughts on feminism and art. So welcome, Amy.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have you here. I'm excited to have every guest because really anybody who will have a conversation and just dialogue is a good time in my book. So I want to kind of give an opportunity for you to introduce yourself to our listeners and kind of let everybody know a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Okay. I have kind of a funny bio. So my name's Amy Mastrine. I'm an identical twin. You're interviewing her shortly after this.
Yeah, which we totally made that connection like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, she didn't know that it was my twin, that she also asked for an interview. So that's hilarious. So yeah, I'm an identical twin. I'm an artist. I'm an oil painter mostly, but I also do fire dancing with my twin. We do these little performances and like at weddings and events and things like that. And I'm also a writer. I write for Evie Magazine, and I have a Twitter account, if that counts as writing. And that's where I promote my art and my Evie writing. So
well, and I've been following. Of course, I've read your articles, and I was also checking out your artwork. And I was fascinated by your artwork. Has very traditional kind of feminine feelings to it. Is kind of what I get, and I almost see like almost a religious aspect to it. I don't know if that's fair to say, especially because you use like the halos sometimes, which I don't even know from what era that is because I am not artistically competent.
Okay.
But how would you describe your artwork? And when you are painting, what is it in particular that inspires you in regards to your artwork?
Oh, I love this question. So other people have described my art, and these are terms I like, as like feminine, and I've heard whimsical and spiritual and representational. So that means it's not abstract. I really don't like abstract art. I like
which is something else we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I can't wait to get into that. I have strong opinions. So yeah, I like form and like maybe a little bit of like whimsy or like surrealness. But lately, yeah, I've been doing a lot of religious work. Like I've been getting into iconography, and the gold halos, like you said, those are very old. I don't even know when that started. I guess the Byzantine era. But it's kind of funny because I liked doing these halos, and then I converted into Christian Orthodoxy, and a huge part of their religion and iconography is these gold halos, and I'm like, oh. That makes sense.
You painting the halos came first before you converted to Christian Orthodoxy.
Yeah, it's kind of chicken or the egg. I guess maybe I was just kind of always Orthodox, like inherently. I don't know. I'm like, oh, wait, this is perfect. Like, I guess I was always trying to get back to this. It's sort of my lineage. I'm like Greek and Italian. So maybe it's just like in my blood or something, like to like paint and make things. But what was your second question? It was.
So I was just curious, like, what is it in particular that inspires your artwork? You know what I mean? Like, I'm guessing because your orthodoxy probably has a good aspect of it, but just I don't want to put any words in your mouth. Just in general, like, what is it that usually inspires you to paint? And when you just side note, when you say whimsy, like what aspect or what do you mean by whimsy?
Whimsical, I guess that's kind of where the femininity comes in, like playful. My art's kind of playful. None of it, like not all of it. Some of it's serious, but I paint a lot of like mermaids, and like I use a lot of color, and I like experiment with like fairy wings and like stuff like that, which I guess is like just
like
I don't know.
Mythology,
I like
almost.
Yeah, I like mythology. I like Greek mythology and like European fairy tales and like magical elements and stuff like that. So yeah, as far as what inspires me, it's funny. I hear a lot of creatives say this, and I'm one of them who's going to repeat it. I feel like I have to create. Like I feel like this might be gross, like spiritually constipated if I don't make art. Like, I'm like, I have to make things or I don't feel well. And I have heard like figures like Jordan Peterson explore this, and they say that creatives are like this, like they feel this like kind of inherent urge to do it. And I've always had that. I've always just like had this like inner urge and draw to draw and paint. And I can't explain it. It's just like in me. And I'm just like, I really want to do this. And I'm really grateful for that, because I know a lot of people, they kind of want to, but they like can't get themselves to do it. And it's easy for me.
Well, and that's exactly what I was going to say. Cause that kind of creativity like fascinates me, because I consider myself to have some creative abilities. You know, I was a chef for a time. I created with food. I like home decor, but I am definitely much more, I guess, left brain. Is that the right side of my, like more analytical, more structured. So I need some type of rules for me to create something, like just to kind of do it out of the nothing, is not a strong point of mine. And I think to myself, like you almost romanticize, like how cool would it be to just, you know, be able to write or be able to, you know, create music or paint. And it's just not there. I love information. Like I feel that like people almost think I'm a little nuts. Like I am constantly consuming information. I literally, I have to Google it. I have to find it. I have to know everything. And that to me is something that is like an inherent need. So maybe I can kind of compare it to that, because I can't even, when people tell me like they don't know something, I'm like, how do you not know?
You can look it up. Yeah.
How do you not know? How can you not be interested? How can that not like, you know, drive you? But we're all different in that aspect. Like not everybody needs to know everything.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. There's just different types of people. Because I used to be the same way. I used to be like, why doesn't everyone just want to paint and draw all the time? Like, that's all I want to do. And then other people don't. And I'm like, oh, because they're just like different people.
Yeah. Imagine that we could be different.
Yes. So there's that.
A lot of because your artwork has a lot of these like feminine aspects and stuff, and you do actually write quite a bit about feminism and femininity with Evie Magazine. Art has become, I guess, kind of subjective, or almost like this weird sort of free for all, where I guess it's like postmodern, you know? And I just wonder if you believe, and specifically like your views with feminism and artwork, do you think they've had an effect on each other in that sense? Like what effects do you think maybe feminism has had on art?
Oh, that's a good question. Yeah, I guess like this, like feminism pushes this idea that like women can be absolutely anything they want to be. They can even be a man. Like there's like really no boundaries with feminism anymore. Like I think it used to have more boundaries around like what it was about and what it wasn't, but feminism itself is kind of a free for all at this point, where we're not even really like defining like what a woman is anymore.
A woman is. Yeah.
Yeah. So so in that way, I guess you could draw the connection to like the art that we're seeing in this era as well, which is there's absolutely no rules around that either. Like there's no technique you have to do. There's no like nothing you really have to like learn before. There's a saying in art, you should know the rules before you break them. I think you should just like know some rules, like, and maybe not even break too many of them. Like, I don't know. I guess I'm pretty orderly, even though I'm creative. Like I'm very process oriented in my art, but I think that like art today, it's a lot of it's political and for shock value and to provoke. And to me, that's not art. That's something else. That's like,
it's activism.
It's activism. Yeah. And I don't think art is political. People ask me this a lot. And I'm like, I don't think actual art is political. I think it's transcendent. I think it elevates the viewer to like a higher place. It makes you feel uplifted. Like there's something beyond this like mortal coil, right? I think that's what good art does and real art does. So if it's just like making a political point, it's like, I don't know. I'm a little more nuanced in that. Like I'm sure there are great oil paintings made of like political scenes in like the 1800s and stuff.
Yeah, but you're talking specifically about like what we're dealing
now,
with today, like in our modern times. And I wonder if, because I've had some discussions with some of my friends and stuff like that in regards to, because the idea, like, especially with art or anything that is expressive or creative, is like a free for all. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That we shouldn't have boundaries, that there should be a free for all, which also creates a subjective view on what is actually good art, what is actually tasteful. I believe that, I mean, I guess like you could maybe simply say that idea is like, yeah, that's free and wild and whatever. But in its essence, I find it to be more, it leaks into chaos. You know what I mean?
Yes.
It becomes chaotic. And then in chaos, it's almost like you have too much freedom that you're overwhelmed and you can't like choose a path. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
chaos eventually leads into destruction. Those
Yes.
are my views. Like, do you see that in regards to artwork? Like, and maybe possibly that's kind of why art's gotten a little weird, for lack of a better word.
I would say it's gotten downright bad. Like it's not even good anymore. I agree with you completely that the chaos leads to I think it actually leads to kind of like nothingness. Like it just leads to this place where like, we don't know where we are. We have no map. We have no reference. Like there's nothing to hold on to really. It's just this, like, everything just becomes like nothingness really. It's like lack of definition.
Destructive and chaos is like, sounds depressing, but nothingness sounds even more like existentially
Scary.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's a little scary. Yeah. It's, I don't know. I think that it's just gone too far. I mean, like maybe art is subjective a little, but it's not completely relative. Like everyone wants to say that it is. I stayed in an Airbnb this past weekend in Austin, Texas, and the art around the Airbnb was the epitome of postmodern kitsch. Like it was just offensive. Like there was a sign that said, if you were in my novel, I'd have killed you by now. It's like, okay, we like flipped it over. There was a another sign that said art has no God. And I was like, totally disagree with that. You know, that's just so negative. And like, what are you trying to say with that? Like that art, it doesn't matter. I think that's such a nihilistic. Yeah. It's such a nihilistic statement. Like everything in this Airbnb was like that. It was like weird faces that like were distorted, that looked like non-human. Like I have a big issue also with like the distortion of the human body and in a way that makes it grotesque. It's kind of like unholy to me. But I can't separate my spiritual beliefs from my art. Like art is a spiritual practice to me. And it's a communion with God. So like I have that viewpoint and I feel pretty strongly about that. I'm sure like that's just how I think. I think that you're working with some spiritual realm when you make art. Maybe that sounds woo-woo to people, but like I do think that's how creation happens. Like you have to kind of commune with something. It's like, are you creating from a place of like goodness and like trying to make things sacred, or are you creating from a place of trying to mock things and destroy them and like make them unrecognizable or confusing for people?
Going back to what you said earlier about how artwork is something that's more like at a higher plane, more ecstasy, like it's outside of yourself to reach a certain, like spiritual plane, and where that falls for different people. Like there's people that are spiritual, there's people that are Christian, that's not really where I'm going with it. But if you think that artwork could potentially lead you to a higher plane in the sense of the positive, well, then you could also argue that there is artwork that can do the complete opposite. And
right.
Yeah. And I think that when you take in that type of imagery that is distorting or, violent or, just anything along those more negative feelings or views, that you're ending up in a less desirable, I mean, you can almost say demonic presence. Maybe that's partly why it bothers you, or.
Absolutely. Like I always say, you have like a visual diet. Like you eat not only with your mouth, like you eat with your eyes too. That's kind of the only way I can put it. So like what you consume with your eyes is going to affect your psyche and your mind and your soul. Like it affects you, and it will, maybe you won't notice it at first, but it's like, you have to be, especially in this era, like very careful, like what you're looking at, because I do think it has an effect on you. It can like, if it can uplift you, make you feel like life is worth living. And like, there's something beyond this world, even that's great, or it can make you feel like things are ugly and it's not very good here. And like, why should I even try? And like, this doesn't matter. I really think that I have a strong sensitivity to like what I look at. And I think other people have that sensitivity, like everyone does, but not everyone's has it as finely tuned, I guess.
Yeah. Everyone's different. Like I always joke, this is like a side track or whatever, but I joke with my friends that if I was ever in a car accident, somebody got a hold of my phone and they looked through like the podcasts and things that I listen to, it's like serial murderers, cults, politics,
Okay, I have that side of me too. I don't want to be, I'm not like a Puritan either. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like everything has to be like absolutely perfect. Like I explore the dark side and like I like
No,
some
but I'm
dark
just
art.
saying, like, I almost consume an unhealthy amount as opposed to like some of my friends are like they also consume it, but they're like, you need to take a break sometimes.
That's fair advice. They're looking out for you. That's good.
And I'm like, I'm working on it. It's just, it doesn't, there's certain things that just don't bother me in that sense. So it's kind of funny to me. So, we're talking about like how you take in art and how it can affect you. And honestly, those effects, I don't think you have to be of any religious denomination specifically in order to acknowledge that what you see and what you take in can affect you emotionally and your psyche and everything. And not to mention that as you persistently see things that are progressively worse, they can almost numb you and allow you to like consume things that get even worse. Like it doesn't get better. It just gets progressively worse. And so I'm just wondering if you feel that, like, you would think that, we talked about how artwork can also be activism and how typically I think you can debate me on this, but the left will tend to use art and art mediums to promote their ideologies and their views and their politics and to influence, the viewers' views in politics. And it just seems like people who are more traditional, conservative, don't have that strength. Is it that they don't have that strength or there's not enough of them? Or do you think that they just don't feel that art should be used that way? And can we even do that? Like, can we maybe turn it around and use it for more traditional, virtuous views?
I do think the right needs more creative activity, I guess. Like I feel a little like there were so many artists when I was on the left. I used to be a feminist and I was just surrounded by people making art all the time. When I started to change my values a little, lean more to the right, that started to drop off. They exist though. I've connected with them, but there's not as many of them. And like, I would say their art is more personal and less political. So like you see this kind of like kitschy leftist art everywhere. Like I posted it once on my Twitter. It's like this vectored like image of like AOC and it's all flattened and like, I'm not sure if you know what I'm talking about, but I see it everywhere, like coast to coast. Yeah. It's in every like bookstore and I like, to me, that's just propaganda. It's not even art because there wasn't really any skill involved anyway. You just took an image into Photoshop and flattened it. And like, that's all you did.
Which is
and
like a whole other thing when we talk about art in the digital space.
Absolutely. Right. So yeah, I think that, I don't know. I think the right needs to like, they do need to be a little like, I don't know, cooler, maybe or hipper or something like,
I debate this sometimes because I'm like, what is it? You know what I mean? Is it that there's not enough? Is it that because you're more traditional, you tend to be maybe a little bit more reserved? Or is it that what the left is putting out is more eye-catching? You know what I mean? Like if you were to put something that's traditional next to, I don't know, something that's like a vector that will pop a color and has like this font across it, like what catches your eye more? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I wonder if it's also that, and it's just maybe like we need to push our creativity. I really have no idea, but I feel like there's no question that culture is downwind of politics. So we do need in some aspect in order to get messaging or views across. It's not just what's being debated on the House floor or whatever. You know what I mean? Like,
right, exactly. And especially for young people, I think, because I think really young people like go towards the left because like that's where it looks like the party is. Like they've got the colors and like they've got all this like cool imagery and stuff like that. And then they maybe see the right as like boring and like, but I think the difference is that like maybe, I don't know, the left works in like trendiness, whereas the right works in like things that are more eternal and like where the values stick throughout time. So that might, I don't know, maybe you have to have more of a like refined idea of things in order to appreciate like what the right's using. But the right, yeah, they just really don't have the creatives. I don't know. Maybe I haven't met them. Maybe that's not fair of me, but I do think there needs to be an image change where it's like, you don't have to be like a stuck-up Puritan to be conservative. Like you can still like colors and like art and pretty things and like be more conservative. I think that needs to.
I mean, I'm definitely hopeful. Like I feel like the umbrella is getting a little bit bigger. You know what I mean? Especially with younger generations coming in and stuff. And I do see a change in that aspect. And it's funny to me that right now the institutions are so progressive that there's like that new meme of be a rebel, get married, have children, buy land, raise animals, which is like so rooted in traditional values. And it's become, so against like the mainstream narrative that it's become rebellious.
Mm-hmm. It's completely wild. Like it's completely wild. So I was a feminist in large part because I kind of got the message that like having a family was the easy thing to do. Like that was easy. And if you want to be like a smart woman, you should have a career and like you should like go to college, and that makes you like, that's the hard thing to do. And that would really like prove yourself. And I never ever once was told like you like or asked, do you want to be a mom one day? Like no one ever talked to me about motherhood. Really, I just got this kind of implicit message that like that's antiquated. Like women that are ambitious like go to college and like do things like that. And then I'm 10 years in and I'm like, wait, I do want a family. Like this is like working all the time in a corporation isn't like, it's not that fulfilling.
It's not fulfilling.
Like, it's not fulfilling at all, and like I'm replaceable here. Like they could fire me. I get emails where they fire people all the time. And it's like, just like goodbye. And like a family won't do that to you. Hopefully. So
I mean, in theory,
with any luck. Like, yeah. So, it's just like, I don't know. I really want, I just want like to reach women in that place that I was in. I needed like someone who was like big sisterly to like talk to me about these things and have reasons for being like a mother and a wife. Because I think another thing is I was getting so much feminist like propaganda through the computer and through college that no one had like refutations. Like I didn't hear any arguments.
Hear opposing views or opposing sides or anything.
Yeah. And they sounded so smart and it sounded so like intellectual and just like intelligent, and no one, and I'd ask, my mom, like, why should I get married? And she'd go, I don't know. Cause like in her time, you just did that. They didn't need to like think about it because things weren't being so deconstructed then. But I'm growing up in this like postmodern deconstructivist era where like everything's being like torn apart, and I needed like reasons to do these things because the culture wasn't just going to get me there. So, she didn't really have much to say. And so that's why I hope like Evie is helping people, because we can be like, here's like rational ideas for.
Yeah, I have those discussions where I think, and I think that's just a nature of being a person, that you get this, you get like a program, you know what I mean? Or a formula, and this is what you follow. And we tend to fall into those things because it's one less thing that we have to think about. The choice is kind of made for us. And so back in the day, the choice was basically made for women. You should get married, stay home, have children, and that is your life. And then, feminist movements came in, and it's like, you're never going to really know your true self until you like leave the home and explore and find a job and everything. And it was just very either or kind of mentality. And I'm hoping that right now we are coming into an era where I do not believe the lie that women can have it all. You know what I mean? No. And I don't believe that men can have it all either. The fact of the matter is that nobody can. You can't, you're only one human being. You can't do everything. So I'm hoping that we're coming into an era that we can encourage women that it is okay to choose what you want to do. You know what I mean? Like you're no lesser because you choose to work at first and maybe have a family later, or because you choose to stay home and have a family. I mean, I have my views of what's the best, but that's not it's not my job to tell you what to do. But I do get very frustrated that we have been in such a long period of dismissing motherhood and dismissing, the value of staying home and raising children. And now it's getting even progressively worse because we're just like getting rid of the concept of women in general.
Exactly. Yeah. It's like, how far is this going to go? Like, I don't know. That's the thing. I'm like, I grew up in a time when it was way too careerist messaging for women. And I didn't get any motherhood messaging. And I had to like go online and like find these circles where people were talking about this. And like, I found like mothers to talk to about it and things like that. And then, now I'm like, from my position, I'm like watching how crazy it is. I can't even imagine being younger than I am now with what's going on with like this birthing person stuff. It's probably so confusing for young girls. Like they're like, what is it? Is it good to be a woman? Like, what does it even mean to be a woman? Cause like, it looks like men can be women. So like, what am I to make of myself? So I think that's a huge problem. And someone needs to pump the brakes on that.
I agree.
Yeah, but I do agree with you too that like I am kind of a centrist on it. Like we need balanced messaging. Like my grandma, for example, I think she never drove. She never really left her small town, and I think she wanted to. And she kind of like would say that she grew up in the same house her whole life, and she kind of wanted to like do other things and never got a chance to. And then there's me who's flown all over the world and like had the total opposite experience of her. I don't have a family yet. And it's like, where's the balance between like, where's the sweet spot between like my grandma, like never leaving the house she grew up in and me like flying all over the world and like not having a family. Like there has to be some like middle ground here where women can like, be outside the home and contribute meaningfully and like explore and also not completely sacrifice like,
yeah, because we're on a clock too. That's the other thing.
Yeah.
Like nobody wants to acknowledge that we're on a clock.
Yeah. And everyone told me, wait till your 30s to do all this. And now I'm 30 and I'm like, I admit I'm like panicking a lot of the time. I'm like, I hope this gets sorted out because I've got like 10 years, and like it's just like I feel a little I guess victimized. I hate to say it, but like I really do feel like older women weren't honest with me about this.
Yeah, and I mean, victimized, like it's just like an annoying word to use, but I think we all went through a period in an era. Even myself, like I'm older than you are. Like I'm 42 years old, so I'm like
you're 42. You don't look it.
I know.
Oh, you're 30. Okay.
But like I'm on the tail end of like the Gen X, or I'm like the Zillennial, you know what I mean? Where I'm straddling there. But I was totally in on it too. You know what I mean? So my curiosity here is like, so you did the feminism thing, right? And you've always been an artist, right? So do you feel that your views of feminism and now leaning more traditionalist has had an effect on your artwork and your profession?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Cause I know this kind of the biggest thing is I used to just paint like one woman. I love portraiture. I would just paint kind of like one lady, like as a portrait. And then when my views changed, I started to really be drawn to wanting to paint a mother and child. And I had younger, but I kind of dropped it. And I just kind of noticed, I'm like, oh, I'm always painting like a woman just kind of by herself. So I started to move towards like Madonna and child imagery. I think, that was probably the biggest change. And, but my art was really an anchor, even when I was a feminist. Like that was the thing. I wasn't like I remember thinking like, cause I was kind of brainwashed, like I should be political in my art, but like something was just like, don't make political art.
Fascinating. You almost felt guilty that you weren't being political with your art. Is that fair to say?
Yes. Yeah. I was like, you should be making stuff about like, Chelsea
women's
Manning
rights.
or women's right. And like, and it was just like something guiding me. It was like, don't, and I never did. And so art was like kind of a weird anchor to something else, I think, where like, I don't know. My art was a little more hippie, but like, it's nothing. I'd like show it to people confidently and just be like, yeah, I was a little more like new age when I made this, but, now it's more, my art's more Christian, but, that, it was always more spiritual than political for me. So thank God. Because I would be embarrassed, I think now.
Like,
I almost left
it's like reading your diary back when you were 14 years old or whatever. And you're like, oh my gosh.
Yes. My Twitter is a different story. My Twitter history, that changed, but like my art, it's you can pretty much look at it and be like, oh, cute. So nothing embarrassing.
I mean, I'm just curious, like, do you think, let me think about this. Because culturally, people are becoming, I think, like as a society, especially today, that culturally we're becoming more subjective with our ideas. And there's almost like a reluctance to embrace objective truths because you don't want to come off as being intolerant. You don't want to be called a name. I think there's a lot of fear in that. Like, we're just kind of like the discomfort of being called something that we don't identify with, even if it's not true.
Mm-hmm.
Like being in the art world and going from more liberal leftist views and feminist views, and now you're becoming more traditional. Did that happen slowly? And did you experience any pushback in the art world because of that?
Yeah, I did lose a lot of like followers and like people who were maybe regular like customers, like kind of that changed. Like it started to be like my audience of who was buying my art was different. Like now it's a lot of like dads, honestly. It's a lot of dads like buying stuff for their like kids or wives. And then that it used to be like young girls who are like 19 or 20, like buying a print of like a girl with like a third eye. Like, and so like no one was mean actually. And I did retain a lot of people. Like they're like, oh, you're painting Jesus now. That's cool. Like they didn't really care. But I did notice like some people, I just don't see them around anymore, like liking my stuff. But no one was really mean about it. I have gotten like stupid comments like, you made Jesus the wrong skin color. And I'm like, I just don't even, I'm like, we're not even talking about that. That's ridiculous. Like, no, and like, we're not making it political. Like, so I just block. But yeah, for the most part, like people were, I don't know. I wondered if anyone was like, what's going on with Amy? Like her stuff changed a lot, but
it's just fascinating to me because, I guess when I was like much younger, I had uninformed feminist views because it was like the default. Like if you're a woman, you should be a feminist. And how dare you not be one if you're going against your own gender if you're not, which that whole argument, especially now, maybe we could have had that argument during the suffrage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And maybe a little bit like back in the 60s, like 50s and 60s and stuff like that in some aspects. But like today, no, shut up. You are just like looking for something to be oppressed about. Like,
right.
Calm down.
Right. Because I don't think feminism even stands for women anymore. Like we were just talking about, like they're too inclusive. You can be too inclusive. Like if you have a movement that's like, I don't know. It just seems like the boundaries are off. Like it's ironic. I think you actually have more freedom within boundaries. Like it's like a paradox. Like you need boundaries in order to like have, like I'm freer like in my house with walls than if the walls were gone and I was just like in the middle of the street, like I couldn't express myself as much. Like out there.
And I think there's an argument. I mean, I think that's a kind of a good analogy because there's a difference between like being in a prison that you've been forced into and not having any freedom, you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Versus like there is a societal like understanding your house, your structure where you're free to really do whatever you want within this space under some parameters. And again, it's because when you kind of just like lose all rules and just allow for chaos, you're really opening yourself you're making yourself very vulnerable to being essentially like taken out. And that's where the idea of like the feminist movement could very well be too inclusive to the point where you're getting rid of women and the idea of women. And like the fact that there's even people online is like, well, what is a woman? Can you even define it? I'm like, dude, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's far. And I was in that mindset a little bit. Like I was a little like in that kind of postmodern like thinking for a while. And I just had to get out. It's like very strong brainwashing. I think it's very strong. And I don't know. It's sad to me because it's like, I just read this book called Irreversible Damage by Abigail Schreier.
I have that one on my shelf. It's like the next one of, if I can sit down with my ADHD long enough to actually read a book.
I read it on a plane, so I didn't have the internet. I was like, I can focus. So I totally understand why it's hard. But she was kind of saying that these like young girls there's so many issues like affecting young girls. And this is why they don't really see any value in being, young women anymore is, one big thing I didn't realize is they're looking at violent porn online, like, because everyone has a smartphone. So like they see these horrible images of things happening to women. And they're like, well, if that's what a woman's treated like, I don't want to be like that. So maybe I'm like non-binary or trans or something. And like, they're getting scared away from like womanhood through that. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, that one, because I mean, the whole issue there is there's like this push to remove any kind of innocence or from like adolescents and children. You know what I mean? As if they're just fully aware of the ideas and able to process these very complex ideas. And I think about myself, like I said, I'm a Gen Xer, and I think about when I was 14 years old. And really, especially, I think there's not enough of an understanding of when young women are between those ages of like 13 and 15, especially, that you're so full of all of these hormones and emotions and women, I think, naturally are very egalitarian. You know what I mean? We don't tend to, like, we kind of want everybody to be fair and the same. And when someone starts to push up, like, the hierarchy isn't really respected. You know what I mean? Which is kind of like where the mean girl iconography comes from. You know what I mean? Like, there's someone that she's just trying to pull everyone down and keep everyone at her level or whatever. But, there was a time that there was like pregnancy pacts. There was, what do you call, oh my gosh, anorexia, like where like groups of young girls, because somebody else was doing it, the others would start to do it. And it is a consistent trend through generations with young women. I've seen it primarily with eating disorders and also 15-year-olds all agreeing to like lose their virginity at the same time. Like, this was a thing when I was younger, which I was like, you're freaking crazy. Why would you do that?
Yeah.
And it's, again, I believe that because young women are so susceptible and so easily influenced with their peers at that time, that we're kind of having this sudden influx of teenage girls, which is what Abigail Schreier talks about. And I just can't, my heart breaks for them. And specifically when we're talking about young women, because you feel uncomfortable as a young woman. And you think that being uncomfortable, like with your body, is, you're finding that the solution to that on social media is this gender dysphoria, when we're not even 100% sure that's what it is.
Right, exactly. And the book, you should really read it. It also goes into how, like you said, young women are socializing each other through social media, which has just been brutal on young girls, right? Because when I was growing up, if I knew people hung out without me, I'd feel crappy. But now on social media, you get to see pictures of it. And like, it's a whole nother level of just like feeling, insecure. So, this book basically says that these young girls are socializing each other. And then the adults are kind of just like ushering it along. Like, this whole medical apparatus is like, oh yeah, absolutely. We're not even going to question how you feel. Like, you need pills and surgery.
Yeah. Through affirmative care.
Yeah. Affirmative care. It's severe. I didn't really realize how severe it was until I read this book. And her solution at the end, she kind of says like, we need to like celebrate girlhood and womanhood and make sure women know young girls know it's a good thing. And like, I guess a little sexism, you might call it sexist, but it's like, say what's good about being this sex. And then like young girls will feel better about it, and
that's funny that you put it that way. Cause that's usually like seen as such a negative term, but
I don't think it has to be.
Yeah. It doesn't have to be if you are just trying to acknowledge, like not trying, but if you're just acknowledging the differences between men and women, and that, these differences exist, they are okay. And what I always find very interesting about this postmodern, like, blurring of the lines between genders movement, which I think is a different aspect. I'm specifically talking about this gender ideology aspect, which is, I think, completely separate from legitimate trans issues and people who suffer from gender dysphoria. Like,
right.
I am not including them in this conversation.
We're talking about the trend. Yeah.
Yes. I'm talking about like the trend in general, is that they're so staunch on what is feminine or masculine that they're almost creating more rules. So like, for
Mhm.
example, if I had been around at 14 years old right now, I was a tomboy. I was a huge
Yeah.
tomboy. I still consider myself to be a bit of a tomboy. I'm just like a more, delicate tomboy because I'm older. You know what I mean? But like my mom thought I was going to be a nun or something because I was, always in jeans. I like buttoned my collar up to the top. Like it was just the way I was. And I was very tomboyish and like hanging out, going out, climbing trees. Well, today, the idea is that there's arguments, let me just say, that if a girl presents with those types of things, that maybe they're actually masculine or maybe they're non-binary. And the same thing goes for males, that maybe if a male is a little bit more sensitive or has some more feminine attributes, it's like automatically that they are therefore women, as opposed to maybe you're just a dude that's more sensitive and maybe you're a chick that likes to climb trees. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally. Yeah. It is actually more rigid in ways. I contend that like most people are a mix of masculine and feminine. I don't think that makes people like non-binary or anything, but like I can be kind of like a masculine girl. Like like I have a lot of opinions and stuff, and maybe that's a masculine trait. But then I'm like super girly in appearance. So, everyone is kind of a little bit of both. I don't think we need to like pathologize it like the way that the medical establishment and the mainstream is pathologizing it. Like, oh, you must like need all this medical care. Like we have such a medicalized society, which is another issue I don't need to get into, but like everything is just being made into like unnecessary like medicalization. I think, and when it could just be like, this is just how human beings are. Like they go through phases and things like that. And that's fine. It's no cause for alarm,
Okay, so we've talked about women and feminism and art and just how like I do you see that there is a relationship maybe between like the destruction of beauty and what is perceived like in society, and it's lending itself to people like devaluing traditional femininity because we're just kind of trying to create this whole free for all.
Yeah, I think that's a good connection because I think actually maybe women do kind of uphold like beauty standards and like, like you were saying, you like to do decor. I do too. And like, women are into like making aesthetics and like making things pretty. The more we like make everything like, postmodern and deconstructed, like as you deconstruct the feminine, you start to deconstruct beauty because women are typically like who holds the beauty standards? Men are more, generally speaking, like utilitarian and like make sure it works. Doesn't really have to be that pretty. Not every man, but I'm just speaking generally here. So I think that, yeah, you could probably draw a connection between like eroding femininity erodes beauty standards. Then that leads into like the art world as well, where, art just gets uglier and uglier and more shocking instead of like uplifting. Roger Scruton has a great documentary about this. I have to plug him every time I talk about art. I think it's called Beauty. Is it Why It Matters? You would find it easily, but he talks a lot about like what has happened and how art has just eroded and eroded and eroded. And you see it everywhere in architecture and in fine art as well. And yeah, it's all just schools of thought. It's all just the way people are thinking. Like,
Yeah, well, and I almost wonder sometimes because I watched recently, oh my gosh, I was watching some documentary. I think it was on Netflix. I can't remember the name of it, but it was about the con men or something like that. And there was I think it happened both with wine and with artwork, but there was somebody essentially making artwork, and it was almost the value of art increased exponentially because it was more about the exclusivity or about the status of it. You know what I mean? About being able to say that I got this, I have this name, whoever's up and coming. And I wonder if in the artwork, like, I don't know how tied in you are into it or if you've had this experience in the past, but that the value of art is possibly more tied to the influence or, the name and the marketing now of that artist versus the actual artwork.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's highly commercialized. Like if it's just like, I don't know if you know Jeff Koons, but his art's horrible. It's not even art in my opinion. It's like weird sculptures and stuff. And his stuff sells for millions of dollars just because it's his name. And he doesn't even make, I know somebody who actually used to work for this man. I'm just like outing him, but he'll never know who I am. He doesn't even make his own pieces. Like he has like a whole team of people. And then they put his name on it, but his hands aren't touching anything that he makes. And I just find that really bizarre. And yeah, it's all the mainstream art world. It's like, it's so fake, everything's fake. I'm pretty independent. I don't really even work with galleries. I just like sell to individually to people and do commissions that way. But you can just tell, like, and a lot of it is money laundering too. Like,
oh yes, I do know.
Like it's hiding like drug money and dirty money and stuff behind like through appraisals or something. I'm not really sure how it works, but they basically just say, this is worth this much, and then it is, and you don't really have to pay taxes on it. So a lot of it is like covering up like bad money. So it's pretty corrupt, which is sad. If you want to find anything like beautiful and precious, like you have to like, it's going to be an independent artist or somebody that's like not well known. Like I think that's where the good stuff is being made. It's just,
and that's sad because I mean, honestly, especially now, I think in almost the entire realm of like creativity, even when we're talking about like, I don't want to get on a side tangent or whatever, but you talk about like YouTube creators, you talk about video creators, any type of creativity has been taken up by corporations and by marketing. And, they determine, be it through an algorithm or be it through a publishing or PR agency, it's them and their connections that are determining what is worth and has value and is worth like being seen. And it's being gatekept essentially. And I think it's really sad because it makes it very hard for independent artists in every medium to really kind of like bust through and make a name for themselves unless they get connected with the right person.
Yeah. And like, it's actually made it, maybe it's a good thing because it has made it so that less and less my goal is like, I don't really have the goal of like, people knowing my name. I just want to like make art and get it out to people because it seems to make them happy. So like in that way, it's like, oh, I'm glad I'm like looking at how corrupt this is because maybe I don't feel the pressure to like compete there because it's like not a good industry anyway. So it's like, okay, like I don't even want that, I just want to like make art for like my friends and family and people that reach out to me online and like, so, but and you can make money like without that big name, there's this misconception that like art, there's no money in art. Maybe it is hard to make it's hard, but there's not no money in art. Like I make a good supplement to my day job with my art, it's like a part-time job. So I also want to like get rid of that misconception where people just say like, you're absolutely going to like make no money at this. Like people want to buy art. They do. So I hope that's encouraging because I struggled with that starting out. I was like, is this even worth it? Like, does anyone care? But people care and they'll support you. Like, because there are people, I think I have this like theory, like God puts artists in the world and then people who like art and then they like have a symbiotic relationship with like, they'll support you in making that because they admire it and you're helping them. And
yeah, I like that idea. And I think that's very encouraging, especially, to people that don't follow that, we're just bombarded with this messaging from the left of what we should be doing as opposed to what we feel called to do and what we feel we have like purpose to do. So I appreciate that you like shared that and hopefully it'll inspire someone that is artistic and that is listening to this to venture out into that. But I'm going to go ahead and wrap us up so we can continue on with our day. But where can everybody, like, if they want to follow you, if they want to find you, if they want to buy your art and support you, where can they find you?
I have a website and it's amy-the-artist.com. And I'm on Twitter as just Amy the Artist. That's pretty easy to find. I'm trying to keep my last name a little more off the internet, but it's kind of a done deal. So the best places to follow me are Twitter and Instagram and to view my website. And my Instagram is kind of annoying. It's Amy_the_artist because Amy
I will provide links in the show notes so everybody can follow you. And also, I would highly recommend that you visit her articles. You have quite a few articles on Evie Magazine. She has great stuff over there. And thank you so much, Amy, for spending some time diving into like some heavy topics, but just speaking honestly and sharing your story.
Thank you. Thank you. I love how much ground we covered. It was so much fun. I love to talk about this stuff.
Sometimes I worry about like, I do these episodes because like the conversations are like fast and furious, but I just really want it to be like, that's how like ladies talk. And that's an honest conversation. You know what I mean?
It's good energy. I love your energy. I think it's great. So I love it.
Thanks so much. Well, anytime you want to come back, you are welcome.
Thank you. For sure. For sure.
Thanks so much for listening to It's Miss Sadie, honest conversations for freedom-minded women. You can find the show notes for this episode at itsmisssadie.com. And if you're loving the podcast, I would be so honored if you would go ahead and hit that subscribe button and leave me a 5-star review. You can also connect with me on Instagram at itsmisssadie or join my email list. Until next time, stay free and stay honest.